Hello again. Today we're going to be talking about conflict management. So, topics for today's teaching are firstly, handling conflict, secondly, the importance of the Enneagram, and thirdly, peacemaking. So, let's get started. First things first, when handling conflict, here I have 7 steps or tips to handling conflict, and the first one is make the first move. Um, I believe as Christians, we are not called to be passive, we're called to be active, and I believe that looks like making the first move. And I think a lot of times what prevents us from this is fear, but First John, it says that perfect love casts out all fear. So I think that for those of us who are in Christ, we are called to make the first move, whether we are fearful or not. And so the second one is ask God for wisdom. And in James 1:5, it says, if any of you are lacking wisdom or understanding, ask God and He will give it to you. And so I think in times where we are struggling to figure out how to deal with a conflict or what to do, I think we just simply need to ask God for wisdom. Third thing is begin with what's my fault. And I think that this is important even if we don't think that we are at fault in the situation, even if we think that it was all the other person's fault. Matthew 7 tells us to take the plank out of our own eye before we point out the speck on our brother's. And so I think this is just taking ownership and yes. But important in this step is avoiding if, but, or maybe statements because when those are said, it completely nullifies and disregards everything you said before you say but, if, or maybe. And so the fourth thing is listen for their hurt and their perspective. I think this is a huge one, especially um, in your marriage or in conflict in the church or with your kids, is to listen for the emotions behind the words. Because a lot of times it's not what they're saying, but how it's being said. And you can learn a lot from how people say things. So the fifth thing is to speak truth in love. And we're called to do this in 1 John 3, which is just how we are to love one each other is by speaking the truth. And then the sixth step is fix the problem and not the blame. And so in this, it's attacking the issue and not attacking each other. And then 7 is reconciliation, not resolution. And so I think some pretty obvious things about conflict are one, it's unavoidable. It's gonna happen, whether it's in your church or it's in your family or it's you have internal conflict. It's something that we're all gonna have to deal with at some point in our lives, and it's difficult. Dealing in conflict, you're dealing with people, you're dealing with other people's emotions, you're dealing with different conflict management styles, you're dealing with different personalities, and maneuvering all of that is difficult. But all that to be said, it doesn't mean that it can't be solved. Conflict is something that can be solved, especially if you're um, wanting to do it biblically. I think we have a great outline for that for us. Some wrong approaches to handling conflict is the winning at any cost. And this is the need to be right no matter what. And I think this is just rooted in a lot of pride in people's lives. And then the second one is peace at any cost, which can seem like the brave thing to do or the humble thing to do, but really I think a lot of times it's rooted in insecurity or fear, and then there's the withdrawal stance, which is just avoiding conflict altogether, which is not good. Suppressing things can lead to just acting out passive aggressively and just not very lovingly. So moving on to the Enneagram, I think the Enneagram is incredible. I've just seen how God has absolutely used it in my life to show me a lot about myself, especially in the area of conflict. And so I think it's important to consider the Enneagram when thinking about conflicts because the way people handle conflict is different. I mean, it differs from person to person. I think a lot of it has to do with their personality or even their Enneagram number. And so something for me, I am an Enneagram 9, which are known as the peacemakers. And so it's actually funny, as a kid, I wanted to be a counselor because all my friends would come to me and talk to me about their problems, and I felt like I was really good at maneuvering them and just talking them through it. And so, yeah, I think nines are. when they're healthy, are naturally good peacemakers. So moving on to peacemaking, it's a absolutely a great opportunity to glorify God and love your brother and sisters well. But I think important thing is controlling the tongue. And James 3:5 says, "A great forest is set on fire by such a small spark," when referring to the tongue and the power that it has in our lives. So I think it's very important not to speak without thinking first, without considering what effect is this going to have on my brother or sister. And I think, lastly, peacemaking is not appeasing or avoiding unresolved conflict. I think initially that can seem like the route to go, but it is not the best or most effective route in peacemaking. Definitely confronting and dealing with the conflict is the most important step in peacemaking. And that brings us to the end. Thank you for your time once again.